Hello and welcome to Just Films and That, with me, Josh Hallam.
And me, Alice Oliver. This is the podcast where we talk about films that we think are underrated, underappreciated, or we just wanted to talk about them.
We're also going to get stuck into some classic films that one of us maybe hasn't seen, and maybe throw in some great guests along the way. So we'll start, as we do every week, with a random question. Alice, do you still have any of your childhood toys?
Josh, yes, I do. I have quite a lot of them. For some reason, I've got quite a strong emotional connection to like teddies and soft toys. Anything that's like soft and cute or has got really big eyes. So I've still got quite a few. My mum tells me all the time, like, you need to chuck these away. Like, you're 31 years old now. You need to get rid of these. You're not a child anymore. And I just can't do it. The oldest one I got from my uncle, my mum's brother. I think it was either when I was born or like on my first birthday. And it's this big white bear. Well, it was white. And now it's like
in the day.
Now it's like a weird brown beige because of, 31 years of grossness. But yeah, I'm just attached to him. I don't know why. And like, I've got loads of Sonic the Hedgehog toys as well, and like Tails and Knuckles and stuff. And like, I just can't bring myself to get rid of them.
Are these at your house or at your mum and dad's?
No, they're in my house.
I was going to say, because if they're at your mum and dad's, and you've already said in previous episodes that they've moved several times, that's brilliant. If you've been taking it with them.
Can you imagine if I'd made them do that? It's like, don't you dare chuck them away. It's like, Alice, we're the ones who have to move it. No, they're in my house. They're quite... I don't like have them on display or anything. They're sort of down the side of a drawer, hidden by a dressing gown or whatever. Because I realise it's ridiculous. I just can't bring myself to check them out. What about you?
No, not really. Do you know, like, do your parents have like stuff like plates and cutlery that they just will not throw out? So like, I think my mum and dad have still got like plates and stuff from when I was little.
Mm-hmm.
Things like, little plates with like Peter Rabbit on it or whatever that they haven't chucked away. But but because I suppose they've never had any reason to. So but that's not necessarily mine. It's just because it's been used for each sibling or whatever. It's been handed down. In terms of my own stuff, I'll tell you what I do have. For my 30th, my parents found my Pokemon cards.
Ooh.
Yeah, in the loft. So I've got them.
Are they worth anything?
I think so. Checked? I've been meaning to sell them. But I haven't got around to it.
You know what? The other day, and this really annoyed me. We were out buying a Nintendo Switch, and we were in CEX, and they had the Sonic 3 Mega Drive cartridge and box that they were selling for 30 quid.
Wow.
And I was like, I had all those games like up until very recently. I had all the Sonics. I had a few like other ones that were for the Mega Drive, and I was like, never going to use these again. Might as well bin them. I didn't even think, and never for 1 second did I think the cartridges would come back. But like retro consoles are quite back now, aren't they? And people like to have like, so they're not just playing it on Xbox or on PC or whatever. Missed a trick there. Oh yeah, you should definitely sell your Pokemon cards, mate.
If anyone wants to buy some Pokemon cards, get in touch.
Do you know if you've got a Charizard?
I got a shiny Charizard.
Have you?
Yeah, I got a shiny Charizard, Blastoise, and Venusaur.
Oh my goodness!
I've got them. I'll show you them in a bit.
Oh yeah, I've heard that the Charizard is worth like serious money.
It's hard to decipher what they're worth because it depends on things like shadows and different things on the cards.
Interesting.
So that's why I haven't sold them, is because it's not as simple as like, oh, this is worth a load of money, I'll just sell it on eBay. You have to like really investigate what it is. So at some point, I will probably put a weekend day aside and investigate it, but I just haven't got around to it yet.
And you can share the profits with your team at Just Films and That podcast.
Yeah, maybe. So this week's film is another listener suggestion. It's Johnny Mnemonic, which I hope I'm saying right, from 1995. Alice, so this was picked, am I right in thinking, by Sam of All Trades on Instagram. So what did Sam say?
So Sam wrote in and said, "Hi, my name is Sam Maskell. I'm an American French born in Istanbul, grew up all over the world, lived in Phoenix, and now lives in LA. Sam said, I like this movie because it's a beautifully dated depiction of the future with a very wild concept and a quite colourful cast. Takeshi Kitano and Udo Kier to Ice-T, Henry Rollins, Dolph Lundgren, and the acting is pretty bad for me, but it works. You can totally see Neo before The Matrix in Keanu's performance. But yeah, I like movies from this era, Virtuosity, Strange Days, etc., and it definitely has an ambience. And I was keen to go with this because, Keanu Reeves was in it and it was one of his that I hadn't heard of. Also interested to see Henry Rollins performing because I know him as a member of the band Black Flag, but I didn't know he was an actor. I didn't know that, films were something that he was doing as well. So the film is about Johnny, who's played by Keanu Reeves. So Johnny Mnemonic it's a Canadian-American cyberpunk action thriller directed by Robert Longo, starring Keanu, Ice-T, Henry Rollins, and a few other familiar faces, and it's based on the story of the same name. So Keanu plays Johnny, a man with a cybernetic brain implant designed to store information, usually top secret stuff about the mega corporations that have taken over the world. He gets caught up in a situation between a group of scientists and a corporation with precious information in his head and is then hunted by them so they can retrieve the data. So he goes on a bit of an escapade trying to evade these people who want to kill him and is helped along the way by rogue doctors, bodyguards, and a group of people living on the fringes of society. Then towards the end, he finds out that the secret info stored in his head is a cure for a disease that has run rampant across the globe, NAS or nerve attenuation syndrome. We're learning lots of new words today. And it turns out that the corporation Pharmacom didn't want this info to get out there because, of course, they were profiting massively off people's misery and eventual death. Had you heard of this one, Josh?
I had. So I'd heard of this one because do you remember back in the day when you had VHSs?
Indeed, I do.
And they'd have trailers on them you were at the
yes.
cinema. And I think I had a VHS and this trailer was on it.
Ah, interesting.
So that's all I knew.
That was
so
it,
I knew the basic idea of he's a man whose job it is to carry information in his head as a sort of a courier type thing, and that it was set in the future. Or actually, it's set in 2021.
2021.
But not only is it set during 2021, it's set in 2021 during an epidemic.
Yeah.
So that was sort of quite close to home.
Yeah, definitely.
But that's all I knew about it. What about you?
No, nothing. No info about it. Hadn't even heard of it. And I had tons of VHSs in the 90s, and I don't remember ever seeing this as a trailer for one. So yeah, no, fun to go in blind. What did you make of it then? Like first impressions?
So going into it, I think it was all right. It had some good ideas in it, and there was lots to like. I really liked the representation of the future because I quite like, back to what Sam was saying, that idea of like it's a dated version of the future. I quite like seeing films like this or something like Back to the Future 2, where it's like what they thought the future in 20, 30 years was going to be, and it's it's like a crap version of what it actually is. So I like that. There was some really good ideas in it that I think probably came from the book. So like the idea of like technology poisoning people. So the whole idea of this epidemic that is happening in the world is that people are addicted to technology, but they can't give it up because we're so reliant on it. And it's actually giving them sort of like a technology overdose type thing, isn't it? So it's in this world where, people have loads of cybernetic implants in their head and on their body and stuff like that. So I quite like that. Some of the good ideas in it, like this idea that there's a character in it who has uploaded their consciousness to a computer after they've died. So I quite like that. I mean, like I said, a lot of it comes from the book, which I haven't read. I liked the look of it as well. There was a lot of like comic booky sort of gore, and it looked a lot like a manga. Is that right? A manga, like a Japanese anime type thing. So I like that. I liked things like the visual representation of the internet. There's a visual, like it's almost like a sort of cheesy video game. It's very campy. It's very sort of kitsch in places. Like again, like Sam said in the notes, that it's all the actors are really hamming it up and really like. There's some like the villains in it. There's at least 2 villains are so scenery chewing, but it worked for me in the film. Like I didn't mind that. It reminded me a lot of things like Demolition Man. And the main one it reminded me of was Judge Dredd. It's obviously made in the same year. This is the Stallone Judge Dredd, not the one from like 2012 or whatever. but I actually thinking about it, that the video I had with the trailer on was Judge Dredd. So that makes sense. But it looks really similar in the way that everything's quite clunky, but it's set in the future. Lots of really great sort of cheesy action movie dialogue in there. So that, like, there's a bit where Keanu Reeves is fighting a bald guy, and he just says something like, "Next time, knock, baldy," or something like that.
I've literally written the same line down in my notes.
And I was like, I was just chuckling away at that. And it is really campy and it is really over the top, but I didn't mind it. What about you? What did you like about it?
I mean, very similar to everything you just said. And like you say about the things being kind of over the top, because it is so, like, because everything about it is so over the top and so extreme, like the costume, the setting, the location, the like the way the whole thing is designed, it all just kind of works together. Obviously, there's some, some issues with the acting that we'll get onto.
Yep.
But it wasn't enough to throw me out of the film, I think, because of the world that they'd created. Like, some of the costumes were crazy. Like, you get these bodyguards who are kind of protecting, is it Ralphie, who is Johnny? So Keanu Reeves is like handler.
I think he's like a handler and agent or something, isn't he?
So you've got these bodyguards that are protecting him, and they're just like done up to the nines with this like really extreme makeup. And there was like a lot of work gone into the costumes and to the whole design of it. Like, so many gadgets and stuff, so many props. I bet the props guy like seriously had his work cut out for him. Like, nothing really looked familiar. Like, you can kind of, all right, there's a few buildings, or, the way that kind of they've sort of depict the internet, that kind of looks familiar. But it was all very designed. Like, they didn't just leave anything up to chance. It all obviously come out this guy's brain, or been described very well in the book. I really like the visualization of when you were like downloading something, or like when Johnny was, I think it's when he's like downloading information into his brain, or people are trying to access information in his brain or something. You get these like mad visuals of, I guess, what it would be like to be in the internet. I don't know if you've seen the Futurama episode where they go into the internet, but they do that, and it's like, what would you imagine the internet to look like if you went in there? And that's kind of what that was, and that's kind of what they managed to do with these like really quick cuts. Kind of makes you feel like you're falling a little bit, and the visuals and the sounds, and like kind of cut in with sometimes this sort of archive looking footage, or like archive footage of cartoons and stuff. So it was quite interesting, and it was quite manic. The cheesy one-liners, there was a few of them that made me laugh, and obviously being delivered by Keanu Reeves as well. It's just a bit like, oh my goodness.
I like that it's from a more innocent age when they didn't really quite know what the internet was going to be. So then it was all just sort of like communications and emails. Now visual representation of the internet, racism and porn.
Well, yes, exactly. You just have to go on Twitter, right? That's what it is. I do really like the concept. I like the whole, the sort of obsession and the importance around data, the evilness of, the giant corporations that have taken over the world and that are essentially responsible for, people dying and stuff. Pharmacom, is it like Pharmacom? It's like, I mean, just like given obviously what we're just very aware of it now, especially, over in America, like how just sort of horrendously greedy and evil these big pharma companies can be. And it's just kind of really like hitting that home, isn't it? It's like the evil of the future. It's not some alien. It's not some, unknown thing. It's literally just guys who want tons of cash.
Yeah, it makes a really interesting point about both technology, reliance on technology, but then also, well, pharmacology, the pharmacology industry, like you say, and how they, they're almost an oxymoron because they're there to help people get better, but for the right price, I guess.
There was one moment where Johnny disguises himself. I can't remember exactly why he was disguising himself, but like obviously these people are hunting him. So I think he just like throws on this disguise to kind of escape. And it's a hat that's got like fake hair attached to it. And then he puts on this massive trench coat. And I was just like, and again, you think like, similar to Minority Report, in given how technology is advanced and stuff, they'd be able to find you. Like your hat and hair disguise is not going to help you here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's quite funny when you see films from back in the day that are depicting the future, and one thing they hadn't quite got their heads around, or what a lot of them hadn't got their heads around, was that technology would become more mobile. So it's all like, it's still computers, but it's still desktop computers. And although mobile phones were around when this was made, no one or this film or a lot of films certainly don't predict that everyone would have a little tiny smartphone in their pocket that, could do everything. And like you say, would just track you.
Yep, definitely. I like some of the Eastern influences. Obviously, I think, does quite a big chunk of it take place in Beijing, or is it all in Beijing?
Well, it's a little bit confusing, isn't it? Because it's certainly in Beijing at the beginning. He mentions Tokyo, but then he mentions Newark, which I think is in New Jersey.
Yeah.
So
that's where
I don't know if it's hinting that air travel is much quicker.
Yeah, maybe. Or got there in an hour.
Yeah, or if it's like one of these places like Judge Dredd where Beijing isn't Beijing, it's just loads of places that are close together that are like the old cities have become burnt out husks and they've renamed cities. It's not that clear, which is something I do want to come on to, but I would probably hedge my bets and say it's that he could travel really fast.
Yeah, quite possibly, right? Why not? Yeah. So I quite like that. And then you've got there's one of the Japanese, he's like, he might be one of the corporation managers or something. There were some bits of the film that I wasn't completely like clued up on, but we'll get to that. But he has like a really long conversation with this other guy, and he's speaking in Japanese, and the other guy is speaking in English. And you get this bit like subtitled sequence, and I really like that. I really like subtitles. I'm a big fan of anime and Japanese subtitles in particular. So I find something really powerful and like really impactful about the Japanese language.
Yeah.
So that was quite nice, and it was kind of almost depicting like this more global, like America, I suppose. Yeah. It's like we have got people from all over, because you had like the scientist guys who were kind of one group, and then you've got like all these henchmen and all these bodyguards. It was quite diverse, I suppose.
It's a global cast, isn't it?
Yeah. Something that I did quite like about it as well was it was very fast paced. Like you were never in one location for very long, and because there were so many different groups of characters and kind of so many locations and so many different types of people involved, you were never with one for very long. And so the change of location was always very quick. The action was all very quick. So it doesn't really give you a chance to get bored, really.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. We'll move on to talking about dislikes now then. So was there... I went first with the likes. So after you, is there anything you particularly disliked or you'd want to change?
So... this was maybe the worst performance I've seen given by Keanu Reeves, and that's even bearing in mind Bram Stoker's Dracula, which also wasn't good. I just don't know what it is about Keanu. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Like the reason, like I first kind of discovered him when I discovered Keanu Reeves. I first kind of was familiar with him when I see The Matrix. And I was a young teenager. Obviously, he's on screen. He's gorgeous. He's wearing these cool like clothes and boots and sunglasses, and he's shooting bad guys. And it's like, oh my God, he's amazing. And whatever it is that Keanu does really worked for Neo. And it worked for that character. Yeah. But when you try and translate that into other things, it sometimes just doesn't work. And he just sometimes looks uncomfortable and like he's not really sure. It's like he doesn't do method acting. Like he can't really get into the zone of the character. And sometimes it's not as big a deal as other times. Like I love The Replacements as well. The John Wick films are good. And I love Bill and Ted. But the other weird thing, he's great in Bill and Ted. They're doing that like young sort of teenage goofy kind of guy. But yeah, some of his acting I found really uncomfortable. So, and we've already touched on, not all the acting was great, but he was the least engaging of the performances, I think.
Do you think it's because it's such a contrast against the other characters? Do you think it's... So a lot of the other characters are quite wacky and big and melodramatic, and he is quite withdrawn and a lot more still and a lot more sort of almost measured in his performance. So it's a contrast, and because they're so out there, he looks wooden.
Yeah, maybe.
That's something I thought, because it's not... I couldn't tell if he was being wooden on purpose. because he's this guy who's like all about the job, and there's bits of dialogue in it that say things like he has dumped a chunk of childhood memory.
This is the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, to fill his brain with the job.
Yeah.
So is it that he doesn't have much of a personality because it's been sort of tampered with, or is it that he gives a bad performance? Because for a while, Keanu Reeves had a reputation for not being a very good actor, and I don't think that's fair. Because the same year he did this, he did Speed, and I think he's great in Speed.
He is good in Speed, isn't he?
And he's great in The Matrix. That's 4 years later. And like you say, it's almost like he's very good at what he does, but he doesn't do much else. But I don't think it would be fair to call him a bad actor. But there's something I can't put my finger on in this one. I know what you mean. Yeah, I mean, like there's the bit where the bit I wrote down that I was like, oh, that's not like you think, why is the director not gone? You're trying it this way. There's a bit where the character played by Dina Meyer, Jane, who's sort of like along for the ride. She's a wannabe bodyguard, and she's like looking after him, and he says he'll pay her, and then eventually, surprise, surprise, she becomes the love interest. Does she say something to him like, "So have you got parents and stuff?" And he like goes back, "So you got parents and stuff?"
Yeah,
and it's meant to be like you're being nosy, and instead of it, you don't believe he's actually annoyed. But then there's another bit where he has this big meltdown about wanting to live in a hotel and wanting to live the life of luxury. But I just didn't quite buy it. I don't know. What do you think? Is it the whole thing of the other characters being too wacky, or is it that he doesn't believe in the script? Like, is there a reason?
I don't know. And I just wonder if maybe the thing that he's trying to do, or if he thinks he's portraying himself in a certain way, maybe it just kind of doesn't translate when it comes through the screen and when the audience is viewing it. But yeah, he is an interesting one, Keanu. I mean, I love him to bits, but just I don't always know what he's thinking, I guess, or like what his aim is when he is acting.
Yeah, it is a strange one, isn't it? It's almost like he took a little while to find his niche. But he doesn't. It's not that he can only do one thing, because, like we've just said, he's good in The Matrix and he's good in Bill and Ted, and there couldn't be more different.
When he's really good in Bill and Ted.
Yeah,
like that feels natural and kind of authentic as far as
and it's cartoony as well. It's not that it's like Neo. He's quite still. He's quite withdrawn. John Wick, solitary man who's lived this life of killing people. Bill and Ted, goofy teenager. So I don't know. You could do a whole dissertation on the career of Keanu Reeves.
You could.
So was there anything else?
So I wasn't always 100% clear on what was going on, basically, on kind of who was who, what was what, who wanted what, why certain things were happening, why certain people were after Johnny, or why Jane was helping him in the first place, who exactly the bad guys were. Because I think maybe that does a little bit come down to maybe how fast paced it was.
Yeah.
And it's like you're not given the time to sort of digest and to kind of get to know particular characters or particular locations in depth, because you're very quickly on to the next thing. So I was a little bit lost at times. Some of the script was just a bit like lacking, I guess, like just quite surface level, I think, for some of the conversation and for some of the
bit by the numbers blockbuster sort of thing.
Yeah, but it's hard to say with something that is set so far in the future, because obviously they're trying to picture, the director, the creator, the writer, whatever. They're trying to picture like, well, what would life be like? Like, what would people be like in this time? And like, it is grim. Like, it's a horrendous future, and like you wouldn't want to live there. So it makes it kind of all it works to a point. And I'm sure if I watched it again, I'd pick up on it all. But the first time round, I didn't feel like I'd got the full story.
I agree. That's one of the things for me. So when I was sort of like, when you said you didn't get bored, and I sort of went, oh, well, we'll see. It's not that I got bored. I think at times I found it so hard to follow. It drew me out. So that was boring. But it's not a boring film. It's not. It's not like an art house film with just dialogue in it, whatever like that. Not that that's boring, but you know what I mean. It's not a boring film, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. And it's not slow. I think it's that. It is hard to follow. Like you say, the bad guys, there's about 4 bad guys. There's a faceless corporation, there's Dolph Lundgren, there's the the guy who is the head of the Pharmacom. There's his lackey with the big long thumbnail. There's all sorts of henchmen and Ralphie and other people. So you're not quite sure who's who. It starts with a massive exposition dump. And it's almost a Star Wars level amount of words rolling up its screen, except it's almost not. I don't know. It's not coherent enough. You like go into it going, I absolutely know what's going on, and that was quite a big thing I think at the time. Again, not to compare it back to Judge Dredd, but I think that starts with a big voiceover and words on a screen. It's like, this is the world you're in, and that is a little bit better. So there was a big exposition dump at the beginning, and then lots of stuff that they sort of character stuff that they didn't explain well enough for it to pay off. Not that it's this really intricate character study. It's a sort of cyberpunk action film in a way. But like back to when I was saying about Johnny having his big meltdown about wanting to be a man who has the good life, and yeah, I didn't get the impression that's what he wanted. It was never like, this is a man who likes champagne and living in hotels and spas, and and he makes a comment about $1,000 a night prostitute or something like that, and yes, there was a bit like that. Also, things like he ends up with a romantic relationship with the female lead Jane. It doesn't really build it up. It's like they just at the end they fall in love and they kiss, and it's almost like, well, that's what they're supposed to do.
Yeah,
that's what the male and female characters are supposed to do. They fall in love, and it's not like it's just never like I didn't. Again, not that I was looking for realism, but it was never like, oh, I absolutely believe they'd end up together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, it was an odd one, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot going on visually, sort of props wise, costume wise, very actiony, and I wonder if that took over a lot of the character development and the kind of coherence of the story. I think
a little bit style over substance.
Yeah, I think a little bit.
The dolphin thing was a surprise.
That was a bit weird. Yeah.
It was like, they were like, oh, he's a dolphin that can read minds or talk to people.
Jones?
Like,
was it Jones the dolphin?
The mind-reading dolphin, who they seem to be using as a sort of portable hard drive.
Yeah.
Which has got to be animal cruelty.
I feel bad for the dolphin.
They're just keeping this dolphin in a tank. And also, Dr. Allcome.
Oh, yeah.
That sounds like a porn name.
It does. Yeah, absolutely.
And I get the idea of Dr. Allcome means everyone gets to this one place, but,
Oh, yeah. It's a bit...
something else.
A bit raunchy.
Yeah.
I wonder if that was in the book as well.
It probably is, isn't it? It probably is, but in the book probably makes a bit more sense. Or, you're not saying out loud, but was there anything else you particularly didn't like about it?
No, not really. And I was, trying to watch it with kind of more optimistic eyes, and I just appreciated, like, there was clearly a lot of work that went in. It was the director's first film.
Yeah.
Still kind of, what we're talking, like mid-90s and stuff. So just kind of getting to grips with, like you say, the idea of this internet-dominated, technology-dominated future that hadn't quite happened yet. But I just thought it was very interesting and very big and very colourful. There's
a lot to like in there. There is a lot to like. It looks amazing. It's got some good action in it. It's interesting. It is the director's first film, and I think I read somewhere, I don't know if it's, forgive me if this is incorrect, but that he envisioned it as a smaller budget arty film.
Oh, okay.
And the studio got hold of the concept.
Oh.
And we're like, we're going to make this the big... there's going to be games and marketing and all that, and they put all this money into it, and then, surprise, surprise, it the two ideas clashed. But because really, if you look at this, it had the potential to be something a bit like, say, Blade Runner.
I was just thinking a bit more Blade Runner.
Yeah, and it is very Blade Runner.
Yeah.
But it did have that potential to be sort of maybe a piece on technology or the pharmacology industry, and instead it's sort of there's ideas there, but it's actually look at all these lasers and look at all this stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, I do think it would have worked better as a more kind of art house, a more toned down, like more focus on the concept and on the ideas, as opposed to let's get all the props in, let's get all the gadgets in, etc.
So we'll move on to talking about the critical reception then. Obviously, before we start, we know that Sam's picked this because it falls into the underrated category.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we've touched on it a little bit that we know it didn't do that well with the critics. How do you think it did? How bad's the damage?
Oh, so I'm inclined to like go kind of low. Like when I'm trying to sort of hark back to other films that we've done, I wouldn't have thought that it would maybe quite make it into the 6s even. So maybe like high 5.
High 5.
I'll say I'll go like 5.9, like the top of the 5s. Want to be a bit more generous, but I probably would have given it that, or maybe a little bit lower.
You're optimistic.
Oh, really?
You are optimistic. So, I mean, you're not that far off with the IMDb. On IMDb at time of recording, it gets 5.7 out of 10.
Okay. Oh, my God.
Then we go to Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, my God.
And the audience give it 31%.
Okay.
And the critics give it 19%.
19.
Wow. I mean, for me, the critics score, and even probably the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, is harsh. It's not a world-class film.
No.
But there's a lot to like in there. What do you think?
I would say that the critics score is a bit harsh. The thing is, though, I can see a lot of the flaws with it, but I can also see a lot of the positives with it, and you can appreciate and see all the hard work that has gone into it. The IMDb score, I would say, is about appropriate.
I'd agree. I'd agree around then. Maybe a tad lower, but not way off. I think there's a lot to like. I think there's flaws, but it's not 19%. I mean, 19% is harsh. I had a little look at like what didn't they like. One of them here says it's not the Matrix.
Oh my goodness!
And it's like
it's not
the Matrix. It's not the Matrix. It is not another film. But also, that's 4 years before the Matrix was released, so that must be a more recent.
These are not valid. These are not valid reviews to watch a film and then go, oh, but it's not this, is it? And it's like, well, no, it's not. You're right. But also, like you say, this was out 4 years before the Matrix was.
What else did he say? One of them here does say it's a Blade Runner knockoff, which I can't really defend.
Yeah, I can kind of get those vibes. Have you seen Running Man with Arnold Schwarzenegger?
That's the sort of where it's like a game show.
Yeah.
So I have seen it, but not for years.
Just reminded me a little bit of that as well, like the way it looks.
It's really similar to a lot of films like that you say, like Running Man, Judge Dredd, Demolition Man.
Yeah, even Total Recall. Bit.
Yeah, that sort of way it looks. One of them says here. I'm going. So it says one of them here. This is Roger Ebert, actually. So obviously he's like, he's he's good benchmark, isn't he? The late great Roger Ebert. But so Johnny Mnemonic is one of the great goofy gestures of recent cinema. A movie that doesn't deserve 1 nanosecond serious analysis, but has a kind of idiotic grandeur that makes you almost forgive it. I'd probably go along with that.
I think that's an acceptable review.
And he gives it 2 out of 4. So that's that's 50. About in line with the IMDb score. So
that's good.
What are we saying then? Underrated?
Yes, I think we can go with underrated, and I would say underseen as well.
Yeah, okay.
There you go, Sam.
So there we go, another one for the another listener suggestion into the underrated category. So good pick, Sam. Like that. Interesting pick, I thought. If you do want to check out all Sam's social media, it's @_Sam of all trades on Twitter and Insta, and I believe there's a podcast available as well under Sam of all trades. Get it on all your podcast streaming services, and then give it a nice rating as well. Yeah. I'm feeling charitable.
Absolutely, fellow podcaster, love to see it. So, Josh, what are we going to be watching for next week?
Next week, we're going to be watching Ned Kelly from 2003.
Okie dokie. Interesting. Look forward to it.
Yeah. So, so join us next week when we're going to be talking about Ned Kelly. In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with us, it's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Just search for Just Films and That or Just Films and That Pod. And the website is www.justfilmsandthatpod.com. Alice, thank you very much for joining me.
Pleasure as always, Josh, and thank you.
We'll see you next week for Ned Kelly. Cheerio.
Bye.